So I might be ending off the rest of this presentation. So Alexandria is, a Rust project, and throughout the 4 weeks, at one point we had to look at Rust code, and so I'm just gonna like kind of run you through some stuff I learned. So Rust is a pretty new language. Like we talked about how there aren't really enough infrastructure in place so that Rust programmers can do the things other languages can do. Um, but yeah, version one was released in 2015, which isn't too long ago, and it's kind of impressive. We have languages that have a version that was also released in 2015 that aren't really up to par, and Rust introduces like a lot of new features. But one of them is the ownership model. You can sum this up as that they're basically like pointers with a lot of rules and contracts, and it's kind of interesting because these rules and contracts essentially give like a ton of guarantees, and one of the big ones is that Rust can't really have data races, um, because the way that ownership works is that it like restricts what you can read and write to, and so because of that, at any given time, you just can't mutate like you can't have like more than one thing mutating something else. And most of this is done during compile time, and that sort of creates like a dynamic where the runtime is like really small, and that the compiler is really like it just will not let you compile things that breaks the rules that I stated like above. But even though it's kind of annoying when you're new, I sort of like learned the value of this, because like if your output isn't what you expect it to be, your code doesn't really deserve to compile. And like it's annoying, but it gives you like a certain level of safety. Like if you have to choose between your program breaking, when it's being compiled, or breaking during runtime, like you're gonna pick compile time every time, just because you have more control over the state of your application. But yeah, so things we've learned throughout the past 4 weeks is that probably one of the big things is that good documentation is really hard. While I was writing the README for our Docker image, we bumped into like problems where like it was like really hard to assume, you know, the reader's like current knowledge, right? Like I don't really know how good, because our focus of the README was a tutorial, but you have to decide like, oh, how much Docker do they know? How much do I need to explain? And then there's also problems with like continuity, where like, oh, we brought up something in the past, like in the beginning part of the README, and you might need that again later on in the tutorial. But it's just like really hard to sort of get that structure right and make it like very intuitive for a reader to understand. And there's also like just basic writing things that are just like really hard. And the next part was that developer time is really expensive. It was like a really hard to sort of set up Alexandria for other operating systems, and just getting that initial setup to like work properly, right? Like you know let's say you're paying a developer like $40 an hour, and they're stuck, like let's be generous and say they're stuck on this for like 1 hour, and you have like a team of 10. That's like $400 of like wasted time, and that doesn't even take into account of like opportunity costs, where like they're spending their time on this that isn't really the core product, while they could be spending time on the core product. So that's like $600 to $800 just completely wasted off of just like this menial like setup part of development. And then one part was also that we learned was that being on the same page with teammates is also just difficult. You have people who are a little bit behind, some people who are a little bit ahead, and the ideal world where like where we all fix our problems and then we meet up together like at the same time. That's just something that's very difficult to accomplish. And we learned this like towards the ends where our tasks weren't as direct. They were like pretty abstract, and like part of the problem was like figure out what the problem even is, and that's just like something that's just very difficult and just a challenge we had to overcome. And so this is like work for the future, like stuff that we think we can continue to contribute to even after this internship. One of them is improved documentation for Windows users. um, it's just like really hard, as I said before, to just write good documentation, and we just like couldn't really afford to sort of consider Windows users. And another thing we could also do is just contribute to the main repository for Alexandria. When we were like testing our deployment stuff, we noticed like like weird errors, like let's say we create an account and then we like delete the database and then we like spin up the image again. um, Alexandria would like cache the template from like a previous session, and so you basically have information that isn't really meant to be seen when we spin, like when we would like spin up the animation. I mean, not the animation, spin up the application again. Um, and there's also stuff like quality of life stuff in the UI, and just general things like that. Um, yeah, that's pretty much the end. You guys can reach us here. These are all our contacts, and yeah, that's the end of the presentation.